Live. Welcome to the Lawyer Henderson podcast. Oh man, it is on. It is on and popping out there in Russia and Ukraine. Oh, it is on. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has declared war on Ukraine, and he warns the West and anybody if you interfere, man, you gonna get that smoke. You gonna see smoke like you ain't never seen before. Anybody who interfere with this war, you gonna get that business. Take a listen to the Russian's president.
Западные страны предпринимают не только недружественные действия в отношении нашей страны в экономической сфере, я имею в виду нелегитимные санкции, о которых все хорошо знают, но высшие должностные лица ведущих стран НАТО допускают и агрессивные высказывания в адрес нашей страны. Поэтому приказываю министру и начальнику генерального штаба перевести силы сдерживания российской армии в режим, в особый режим несения боевого дежурства.
No, that's what I'm. Now that's a man who is about that smoke. Well, he's in Russia, and you're in the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. Let's break it down as to what's going on. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, has vowed to make sure that his fight in Ukraine is about establishing the old Soviet Union. He recognized that most Europeans in Russia is getting too old, and he wants to draw as much line as he can to stop certain types of things going on in Russia. As more and more of Russians and people get older, and they're basically on the border of Southeast Asia and India and things of that nature. So he has more of those people coming in, and his problem is basically saying, hey, we old white men, we're no longer going to have control. This is about our children's future. And the West have been lying. They have been promising us all kinds of things. They have been reneging on things. Well, basically, the Western media is trying to basically say, well, no, that's not it. Putin, you're just a madman. This is blah, 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 blah. But, man, he brought out a point. You know what I'm saying? In certain situations, I kind of agree with him, but in other words, he's still a white supremacist, so I can't agree with him on that. But you're in the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe, and we're going to basically get to that story. But before we do that, old Jim Crow Joe Biden, as you know, we already knew this, but he selected Kantanji Browm Jackson. He chose her as the pick for the Supreme Court. And some Republicans have complained that the nominees should not be made on the ground of race and gender. And knowing the promise to put a woman on the court acted on by Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, then old Jim Bo James Clyburn, he stepped in. The South Carolina congressman and a House Democrat whip who endorsement brought propelled Biden to the presidential nomination and produced his promise to pick a black woman, appeared on Sunday, CBS's Face the Nation. So then you got a bad wench up there. Of course, she's married to a white man, so nothing's going to change on the racist Supreme Court. That organization is only to maintain white supremacy. The Supreme Court has basically been, as Dr. Claude Anderson had pointed out, has been and continues to be the most racist organization that this system has ever created. So it's no change in there. But I digress. We, ladies and gentlemen, is going to talk about it. I'm talking about it. Yes, but let's get on to it. Hit that thumbs up button. Um, hit that like button, like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, to hit the cash out, so that we can continue to bring you the smoke. We can bring you all the updated stories and information when it comes available. This is going to be, that's how you get your notifications and things of that nature. Um, you know, I think if you basically just just make sure that you keep in contact with what's going on, or make sure you keep up to date what's going on in the world, even of course in this country, because as Black folks we are under attack as well. We have no real interest in the whole fight that Russia has with Ukraine. A lot of people are trying to drag us into it slowly but surely. We're not interested. But to start us off on this whole talk about Russia and Ukraine, let's get into it. We're going to credit CNBC. We're going to take all of our pointers from there. Putin orders Russian nuclear deterrent forces on high alert. Ukraine and Russia delegation to meet. Okay. Russian President Vladimir Putin, his country's put his country's nuclear deterrent forces on high alert Sunday amid a growing global backlash against Russian invasion of Ukraine. Despite the escalation, Ukraine Defense Ministry said representatives of Ukraine and Russia had agreed to meet on the Ukraine-Belarus border with no preconditions. Meanwhile, the Russia advance into Ukraine continues. Russian military vehicles enter Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv, with reports of fighting taking place and the residents being warned to stay in shelters. The capital of Kyiv remained under Ukrainian control, with a key official in Kyiv city administration asserting the capital completely controlled by the Ukrainian army and defense. Here, they have point out links, but we'll talk about that later. But they are basically saying that we're going to put you on sanctions. We're going to put you on sanctions. We're going to put you on sanctions, Putin. We're going to put you on sanctions. And we're going to put you on sanctions. That's what the West keep on saying. We're going to put you on sanctions, you see. We knew that this was coming. We knew that World War III was possible. We knew World War III was possible because Putin was sick and tired of the West lying to them. His whole strategy is to basically to make sure that he bring back the relationship and the stronghold of the old Soviet Union. You see, unlike his predecessor, which was Boris Yeltsin, who is now deceased. Yeltsin was kind of like a drunk. He was not taken serious. And at the time, I believe Putin was the prime minister of Russia at the time, before, he was also an army member as well. So the thing is that, okay, we got to basically make sure that we draw a line. Now, the Ukrainians was basically doing things that was out of Russia's sight. They didn't know that they were doing businesses with Western companies like Shell. They didn't know that they were basically trying to block the oil supply underground. And they didn't know, because that's really how the economy of Ukraine had grew. But Russia was supposed to get certain types of monies, and they were supposed to basically make sure they communicate with Russia as well. Now, as you know, that they got an economy almost the size of a small country like Iraq, but which real small. That's how their economy is, because most of their money is in their defense. Okay, and they become the fourth largest military in the world. Okay, and so that's Russia. Russia basically was saying that the West had broken a lot of promises, and now they're sick and tired. Basically, we, like I said earlier, may be headed to war. Now, that begs the question, do we go to war with Ukraine and simultaneously have to watch another war break out? Remember, China is also eyeballing Taiwan, and we're going to get to both of those cases. But in addition to that, you have to understand why President Putin is mad at the West. Putin is saying, listen, Ukraine has been under the control of the Russian Empire for 40 years. Ukraine now, Russia is saying, I don't see y'all as an independent country yet, because when they invaded in 2014 and took over Crimea, it was all about the oil reserves that was underground. And so therefore, the communication of cutting off Russia in order to also control that supply and to bring the forces back under a Soviet control is the only way we can fix that. You see, and let's look at that. You see what I'm saying? Not only that, is that Russia is sick and tired of the Ukrainians and those people who basically were from Southeast Asia, right? They basically, like I said earlier, became a part of Ukraine, and they formed the country where Southeast Asians was able to come in and also control the democracy. And as you know, when you're trying to spread so-called democracy in a country, that is the opposition to communists, which is what Russia is. And now Russia is saying, we don't want you to join NATO. NATO is the North American Trade Organization, I think. We'll look at that in a minute if we have time. So he don't want Russia to join NATO. I think it's the North American Trade Organization. But like I said, I'll look that up in a minute to make sure I'm telling you right on that. But anyway, what is going on with Vladimir Putin? Vladimir Putin recognized that with the strength that he has right now versus the strength that he will have in the next, or whoever will become the Russian president next, you have now a decrease in European manpower, where your country is dwindling. A lot of people are poor there. You basically have a lot of people who barely survive in the streets. So Europe, that's the reason why a lot of white folks have to move out and go to other countries, because Europe had become scarce. It had became a country where you really don't have a lot of people there who could really do anything because of their economy. You see, but what happened though? You see, Russia for 40 years, it ruled over Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and other nations, and brought them into what we call the Soviet Union or Soviet Empire. And in that Soviet situation was ethnic conflicts. Okay, thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Okay, it was ethnic conflicts there. And it was always ethnic conflicts. Why? Because there again, you have Europeans, you have Russians, and you have Ukrainians. Now, why are they called Ukrainians? Because they're not really Russian, okay, even though they speak it. A lot of them coming from, like I said, Southeast Asia, because in India, in Russia, is almost connected there, okay? So a lot of them went over to Russia, see? So you can say, this is white on white crime. Yes, in a way it is, yes. But you have a lot of people coming from India because of the so-called Middle East is right up at that border, you see. So that's how they were able to get to Ukraine. And that's how the President Zelensky right now is the president. Okay. He's from India. He's not a European person per se. But anyway, let's go on to this particular conflict. I want to start out during what we call the Cold War and basically make sure that I think Putin is still upset about losing that. Because the Cold War was not really about real military fights. It wasn't really about basically, military action that much. Okay. So he's still having his mind, oh, I lost, the Western powers are saying that I lost the Cold War. Okay. Y'all saying I lost the Cold War. Okay. We'll see about that. So over the years, while America was focused on Iraq and Afghanistan, basically China and Russia was building up their partner relationship, but they didn't always agree together with each other. They didn't always agree. But one thing they agreed on is that they cannot stand the West. They can't stand America, France, Great Britain, or Western, or Britain in general, or the country of Britain. And they basically knew that the West have screwed them out of things before. Okay. Now, let's go back into what happened during the Korea War so that we can get you back as to why they now know the strategy of what the West is always doing for their fight with Ukraine. And this old joker we got in office, what's his name, Biden, he basically is going to, I think they announced $425 million or something around that amount to send to Ukraine. But during the Korea War, when Truman and Eisenhower was in office from June the 26th, 1950 to July the 27th, 1953, North Korea invaded South Korea following the clashes along the border of rebellions. And South Korea was backed up mostly by the United States and what they call certain types of, it was backed up by the rebels as well, that basically wanted the split, okay, between the Koreas. So North Korea was supported by China and the old Soviet Union. So just keep in mind, you had South Korea, you had Japan and France, and all these people there back in South Korea. The North was backed by China and the old Soviet Union. Okay. South Korea, of course, like I said, was not only supported by those nations, mainly the United States, but it was also supported by the United Nations. Okay. And at that time, the US and the Soviet Union divided Korea into two separate occupations. Now just think about that. North Korea, South Korea, in which they're still fighting today. But there are certain people who want the two countries to unite and not be a separate territory any longer, so they can strengthen their power in relationships in a sense. So when after the U.S. and the Soviet Union at the time that Russia was a part of, they were able to basically do business at that time. The Soviet Union was, and was able to then do what Western powers often do, is to bring people over there to exploit things. Okay. After signing what they called the Korean Armistice Agreement in 1953, brought an end to the Korea conflict. So when you look at what they're trying to say here, they're trying to basically, the Soviet Union said that we were cut off to certain things because now we don't have what the West have, and that is a periphery. Remember, if you keep on basically bringing outside sources in, and you're blocking an economic thing, you're going to basically be powerless. Now, Russia has a lot of, billions of dollars in the SWIFT bank, in which they're trying to cut off now. But the problem that they're having now is that their society is still poor. Okay. We're going to basically look at the fact that even in the Vietnam War, okay, remember the conflict of Vietnam where you had Lagos and Cambodia from, and they were in a conflict of 1955. So what was really going on at that time, again, North Vietnam was supported by the Soviet Union. It was supported by China. South Vietnam, the US, and other anti-communist allies, was basically upset. They knew what the United States was doing. The United States was engaging in what they call proxy wars, which means it's an armed conflict between two states or non-states actors, which then instigate, or they would basically be a party to a war, and what America is now calling allies to countries, and they would give them, they were involved in a hostile situation. Like right now, Joe Biden is engaging in a proxy war. He is actually and literally helping Ukraine to fight to basically stay what he calls independence, even though that Ukraine is not a part of NATO. You see, so now, in a sense, the Soviet Union, or Russia rather, is saying, look, we have so many European countries, trying to join NATO. And basically, well, what do I have here as far as partnership here in Eastern Europe? What do I have here? You understand? Why are you basically leaving us out? I want a periphery like you white men in the West. And Putin is basically saying he's been blocked. He's been isolated. They isolated him so much that he basically now is losing his damn mind. You see what I'm saying? Now, like I said, back in Ukraine, Ukraine has made a deal with the U.S. oil company Shell, gas company Shell, and Ukraine is basically then is undermining Putin, as it was supposed to, like I said, bring a pipeline down into certain types of area, and it was only there in Crimea, which is why he basically went to war with Crimea in 2014. Listen, I want to know what's the communication. I want you to tell me who you're selling this oil to. He had no idea that they basically built this line. Okay, he had no idea then that they were able to basically become independent on oil by doing business with outside influences and basically cutting Russia off to that market. And so, in a sense, then, the first Indochina War between France, colony government, and leftward revolution movement in Vietnamese, remember, like I said, they used to basically involve Russia and the Soviet Union in these proxy wars. They used to basically involve Russia in other types of wars as well. But they basically then started to cut off Russia. Remember, during we basically forget that the Soviet Union had went to war with Afghanistan in the 1980s. You understand that? You remember that? Remember when Russia, the Soviet Union, went to war with Afghanistan in the 1980s. This is at the time that I think Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan was in. I think it was Jimmy Carter, but they went to war in the 1980s, And at that time, the Western powers, okay, diplomatically isolated the Soviet Union again. They said, wait a minute, y'all still isolating us now. Y'all still don't want us to have a periphery. The Potsdam Conference, remember, after Germany surrendered during World War II, the Soviet passed a demand, made a demand in what they call the Yalta Conference. And they asked the West for $20 billion of reparations at that time, and to be taken from Germany occupation zones in 1975. Okay? So the American and British refused to fix the dollar amount for the reparations, which they owe us too. But they permitted to draw Russia to draw lines in certain places at that time as well. Now, see, this is where you have old drunk. I think no, it was Bolshevik. We'll get to him in a minute. But the Russian invasion in Afghanistan was very crucial because remember, okay, the Afghan and the Russia war, it happened in the 1990s under President Carter. A lot of people forget about that war. And in a sense, then, it was a 9-year guerrilla war against the Democrat of Afghanistan. And the Soviet army throughout the 1980s mostly was in the Afghan countryside, you see. The Mossadegh Empire, in which they basically were now was called the Taliban. I mean, not the Taliban, but yeah, the Taliban, was variously backed primarily by the U.S., Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, and the United Kingdom. The conflict was this Cold War proxy war again, you see. So Russia is saying, wait a minute. You basically said that Afghanistan could be our periphery. You basically said that we can invade Russia and we can set up a financial relationship and an oil relationship with Russia. What the hell are you doing? US, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, China, and United Kingdom. Because remember, they had Iran at first. And Iran sided again with Russia too now. It says that this is unfair, that the United States and Great Britain, they want to control everything. They want to control the oil. They want to control all the reserves. That's why in 1991, when Saddam Hussein went to Kuwait, and remember, he basically firebombed all of the oil wells and oil fields there. And Bush came in, Father Bush came in and basically said, no, Saddam, you need to get out of Iraq. We got our, we basically we already got that oil supply. You need to basically get out of Iraq. Now, remember, Saddam Hussein asked George Bush, he said, listen, he asked you, he said, do y'all have a problem with any kind of invasion that I do on Kuwait? And George Bush, Daddy Bush, came back and said, well, no, we have no problem with you invading Kuwait. Remember he said that? And so when they finally found out that it could enrich Saddam Hussein in the so-called Middle East, then that's when Daddy Bush got involved and now trying to get Iraq out of Kuwait. You see what I'm saying? The fight of oil, which is Russia's biggest supply, or which Russia basically, like I said, enrich himself and could enrich its defense capability. That is very important, even if it means starving their own people in the streets, and also their decline in their economic system, which of course is going to happen to the United States, because remember, United States don't involve Black people in their economic system. Okay, but that's another story for another day. But at the time of the Russian invasion in Afghanistan in 1975, you seen that the Mossadegh rebels, they were basically there exploiting the land, and they were basically was doing all kinds of business with the Soviets at that time. And it got to a point where they were enriching themselves and everybody was struggling for this oil. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. And so now the United States, like I said, again, not only that they did, got into the Korea War and engaged in proxy wars, but here go the United States again and Great Britain engaging in more proxy wars. Okay, in other words, but what we're going to do, we're going to side with this particular country and we're going to finance weapons to them. We're going to give them all kinds of ammunition to fight their enemy and blah, 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 because we got to spread democracy everywhere. And keep in mind, you had women in Ukraine talking all of this crap about, I'm a feminist and I'm this and I'm gay and I want LGBT rights and blah, blah, blah. And Russia said, no, wait. We can't have all of that. We basically is becoming an extent. We don't have enough Europeans. Look, most of our white men and women are not having babies. There's a fertility issue there. What are you doing bringing this feminist movement to Ukraine? You basically need to start populating the country, or we are not going to be able to preserve whiteness. Basically, that's another issue he has. And so America and all these other people and Southeast Asians and all these folks said, no, we have to preserve democracy. We have to make sure democracy is extended to everybody, even though we as Black people have never, ever experienced democracy here, you see. But Russia basically is sick and tired of the West. That's the reason then why he said basically anybody who basically get involved with this conflict with Ukraine, they're going to experience, you see, a situation where they ain't never experienced before. You see what I'm saying? What he's talking about is his nuclear deterrence that he have. Hey, we're going to signal that we're going to, send our nuclear weapons over into your zone. Don't play with us now. Don't play with me. I'm here to take back Ukraine from these thugs who is basically corrupting our country. That's his thought pattern, not mine. Don't play with me now. See, this is not what they're telling you in the white media. The white media is just saying, "Oh no, you're dangerous, you're dangerous, you're dangerous." Okay, and that's fine because, like I said, Putin is a white supremacist. So I have no take in any side. I'm just telling you what the man is saying and giving his side of the story throughout knowing the history of what's going on between the Soviets and America and NATO and all these folks. But during the Mossadegh Empire, remember, like I said, they were backed by the U.S., Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, and the United Kingdom. And like I said, they basically were backing, they were basically interested in making sure that the oil did not, any relationship, any business relationship, none of that went to the Soviet Union. None of that. And so now Putin was saying, okay, this is getting out of control. Y'all basically is keep on saying that I can't have a periphery. I can't do business. Y'all are all in Africa. Y'all are all in other parts of the so-called Middle East. Y'all are exploiting that land. And as a white man, I should be able to do the same thing you white men doing in the West, basically. Okay. Now, here's the thing, though. A Black reporter asked him, this is very important for Black people to listen. You see, because sometimes the white media will send a black person to ask these questions. And that's only just to, get them to think that they got some power to ask these questions to a foreign dictator or whatever. But she asked the question. She asked Putin, why have all your political opponents been either shot and killed or wind up in jail? And Putin responded to her by, listen, death happens, shit happens, and people go to jail, and he reminded the black reporter that, listen, y'all dealing with the same thing in America with the black people getting shot and killed in the street. And he also talked about the fact that you have the Black Lives Matter movement. Brilliantly ended her whole conversation like right there. You see what I'm saying? In other words, don't talk about political prisoners, so-called political opponents that are shot and killed. At first, you have to deal with the situation in the United States of black people getting shot by these race soldiers. How about you deal with the Black Lives Matter situation before you, as a black female reporter, ask me about what's going on in my country? And she had to sit down. Okay, you see, and this is all of just really, it's just a bunch of crap. But anyway, that is not the whole thing as far as a nuclear situation. See, here's the thing. America promised Europe, the Eastern Europe, promised the Soviets that they will have Afghanistan if they need it. That's the reason why they invaded. They were, like I said, they were on the west side in the 1980s. And then, as Vladimir Putin basically pointed out that, remember, Bush went to war with Afghanistan in 2003. And what did they do? They occupied the oil space there, and they gave the Afghanistan billions of dollars, almost $1 trillion, so that they can make sure that they have access to the reserve. Again, cutting the Soviets or Russia off to that relationship and that business transaction with Afghanistan. You see? And so some white news reporters said, well, what make Putin tick? That's making Putin tick. You basically offered him a periphery. He was in the 1980s, and even during what they called the Soviet Empire, they were engaging in certain types of proxy wars too. And now, like I said, France and Great Britain said, no, we're going to cut Putin off. We're not going to let him do anything. We're going to cut Yeltsin off to this. We're not going to let the Soviets have anything. Y'all don't need no periphery. We're going to be exploiting black people. We're going to be exploiting Asian people or Indian people. Y'all don't have no claim and rights to our periphery, you see. And that's what it's all about. Who could hijack all of the resources to maintain their country? Because, like I said, remember, white people had to go all across the world to engage in their economic political system because everything was scarce in Europe. So that's the reason why white people are in Africa. That's the reason why China is Africa. That's the reason why every country is in Africa, because Africa produced all of the mineral wealth. You see, on the motherland, they're producing all kinds of things. They have all kinds of mineral wealth and other types of resources that the world wants. You don't have the same thing in Europe. That's the reason why Europe is drying up right now. You don't have the same thing in what we call China today. That's the reason why China has investment in Africa and it's buying up debt in certain types of African nations, and therefore keeping the Africans in a situation where they're going to have to basically be indebted to the Chinese. You understand? We're talking about a situation of exploitation you have never seen before, even in the sense of white people's decline, where they're going to be a minority by 2045, or even less than that, by the way. That's the reason then they need Hispanics, they need Southeast Asians to be a part of their race and to basically to build a coalition because their race is becoming extinct. It's reducing in power and basically they're frightened right now. They're also frightened about the so-called millennials and Gen X's, who's going to be running the country in the next 25 years too. You understand? And the way our kids are acting, they're not even thinking about, what I'm saying, having to be deployed in the army or having to be deployed in the military. They still on this, man, let me go get my new shoes at the mall, y'all. Shit, cuz. They're still on that. You know what I'm saying? The young folks is not talking, and that's because this educational system has dumbed them down. That's the reason why they're not prepared to run the nation. And so, therefore, this is not only happening to Black children, but as it is happening to white children as well. Dumbing down your country is a real threat now. You see, the coming world order is going to be very dangerous. Speaking, like I said, of danger, basically, there is another threat that has been also closely watched. Let's read the article. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. You're listening to the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. Thumbs up. Let's talk about it. Like, share, and subscribe. As YouTube is going to mess with our video. Let's look at it. At some point, I'm going to learn how to put these articles up so y'all can see them. I just haven't been having time to do it since I'm new to YouTube. Only been here 2 years. But here, an article read that Taiwan foreign minister calls U.S. help critical to deterring war with China. To beg Taiwan. As Taiwan continues to face a military threat from China, Foreign Minister Joseph Wu said this week the Taiwanese government continues to focus on its asymmetric defense capability, including U.S. assistance to make it an unattractive target despite its limited military power. We want to be people here in Taiwan to be able to defend themselves if China is going to launch a war against Taiwan, Wu said. Taiwan has lived under the threat of military action by China since China's Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, flew the mainland after losing the Chinese Civil War in 1949. While the conflict had remained largely a stalemate since then, with Beijing continued to claim Taiwan as a province. An aggressive military modernization campaign by China means it could be able to attack Taiwan as early as 2027, according to the U.S. Defense Department. Wu said China could have the potential to attack targets other than Taiwan in the future. China has made so much investment and have modernized their military capability of not only striking at Taiwan, but go beyond the first island chain. So we need to develop as asymmetric war so that Taiwan is able to defend itself, he said, referring to the name of the defense barrier of Taiwan, Japan, Okinawa, and the northern Philippines. Similar concerns had led the United States as well as France, Japan, Australia, India, South Korea, the Philippines, and the other European Union to become more vocal about the future of Indo-Pacific security in the face of rising China. Earlier this month, Washington released its latest Indo-Pacific strategy, which called for greater cooperation with regional partners. You see, Wu said Taiwan must be very careful to not provoke China and trigger a conflict. The most recent incident occurred in 1995 and 1996 when China fired missiles towards Taiwan ahead of its first democratic election. Further triggers could include a formal declaration of independence by Taiwan from China, which is why leaders such as President Tsai Ing-wen, I hope I said her name right. I messed up her name, I think, are extremely careful when they discuss Taiwan political status. Wu said that domestic problems could also force Beijing's hand if it needed to unite China against a common enemy. We also need watch out for the classical theory about authoritarian countries. They like a divert domestic attention by initiating external conflict. If something is happening in China inside their country, for example, economic slowdown, unemployment, or major disasters, things like that, that might be the time that we need to watch very carefully, he said. In the meantime, Taiwan continued to face China efforts to sway public opinion as destroyed morale from within Taiwan by convincing civilians democracy is doomed. Tactics have included more than 1,000 Chinese People's Liberation Army air sorties towards Taiwan at last year. So, Wu said, as well as disinformation campaign and political infiltration. You see, I don't need to go on about the threat that Taiwan has with the United States. I mean, against that China is going to invade Taiwan. Okay, now the fight in Ukraine. Okay, the fight in Ukraine, because even Ukraine not being a part of the NATO, it is causing still for the United States to come in and be what they always claim to be the world police. That if, in a sense, then, that not only if Russia is prepared for a nuclear war, and that if you're prepared for a nuclear war, then you have to also basically look at the emboldened of Xi Jinping. I hope I said the president of China correctly. Xi Jinping. He basically, before he became president, I think the former president, I don't know which one of them, but in 1995, when old Clinton was in office, they knew that they didn't have the real capability as they do now, because the old situation was in 1995 that the article was referring about is that, remember when China had missiles towards Taiwan's airspace or air defense area, where the air zone where you can't go and fly your missiles. The United States had to send certain types of ships and things and deterrents on the water to tell China, hey, back up off Taiwan right here. That happened in the 1990s. China is now more advanced. It has increased its operations, their technology, their air defense components. They also have certain types of lasers that's pointing at Australia, other parts of situation, and they basically can look at their air defense strategy and basically now defeat the United States, but they need more than 10 more years to make that an actuality. As we talked there about the United States declining as a world power, in a sense then, because they have spent all of their time of keeping that black man in a submitted labor market, you must recognize then that our future is at stake and it is going to be very, very vital here. You understand? These people have capabilities that can send a nuclear weapon to the American West Coast right there in California if it wanted to by 2027, if it does not already have the capability. You see what we're talking about here? We're talking about two countries, Russia and China, who has built a relationship and have brought India into it as well, and brought Iran as well. Remember, these are people who basically is now going to confront the West in a global outbreak then which what we describe as a possible and a potential War III, is imminent, you see. And that's the reason then why Russia is upset. They basically have been cut off along with certain types of situation. And instead of promoting democracy like Taiwan and like Ukraine is trying to do, they said, no, you have to return back to your communist roots. You have to bring your so-called independence back up onto our a country so that we can be a one country nation. And so ain't no such thing as no independent country in China as it relates to Taiwan. It's no such thing as an independent Ukraine as it relates to Russia in a relationship with Taiwan. And hell no, you're not going to join NATO. You see what we're talking about here? We're talking about trying to basically be independent. Small nations trying to cut themselves off to the relatively the big nations that is basically supposed to be a part of. And this is putting Putin and Xi Jinping in a situation where they're sick and tired of the spread of so-called democracy. Sick and tired of all this LGBT movement stuff. Sick and tired of them turning so-called democracy into promoting homosexuality and also breaking up the legacies and breaking up the commitment that the West made to its nations, and was able to then say, hey, we're sick and tired of the whole damn thing. Like we as Black people should be tired of not getting no tangible benefits here. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Finally, before we basically go off air, let's talk about certain things again that now Jim Crow Joe Biden is doing. Jim Crow Joe Biden is now sending over $400 and something million. I don't know the actual numbers to Ukraine. You see what I'm saying? Everybody is getting money besides Black folks. Everybody's getting that bag besides Black folks. Everybody is getting this situation where they get real access to money and capital, while Black people are getting nothing but symbolic gestures. We have to get this old son of a bitch that's in office now out of office. This man is a disgrace. He is a disgrace. He basically, in a sense, then cannot find no money for Black people in this country. But when it comes to helping people with wars and all of these things, this son of a gun is already there, ready to provide it. This is the utter disrespect that we as Black folks, it's basically our children is acting up because they're sick and tired of the civil rights generation talking about all this bull crap and not telling white people the truth about what they're doing to Black folks in general. Okay? The same thing with Putin, when they basically said, in a sense, then that they were going to give him that $20 billion. Remember, they told him that, hey, we're going to, instead of giving you $20 billion, we're going to basically make sure that you can draw, your land and your mark as to what you want to control there in Eastern Europe. And that's what divided Europe right today, as Great Britain and UK got Western Europe, Eastern Europe, then went to Russia and other parts of the Soviet countries. And they split off together and they isolated Putin. And now he became so deranged and so upset, creating him to be a madman. You must recognize that this is the same situation that the United States had put Black folks in. And the fact, in a sense, of people is trying to say, oh, he's a madman. But we basically understand what madmen do when they're white. A white man, basically, when he does not get what he wants, he destroys it. That is basically, not a madman in a sense. We saw what Hitler did, right? What he did in Germany, okay? What Hitler did in Germany, is nothing new to what we have been experiencing in our enslavement. What Hitler did in Germany is what Putin is looking at as far as strategy for the West. And like he said, if anybody get involved in the conflict, they basically will pay the price. And that's basically the bottom line. I want to also suggest, though, that if you go to read the article at the United Nations, remember at the United Nations, it was China and Kenya and Russia, who's the president of the United Nations Council, that basically block certain types of intervention by the UN. And so the United Nations said that they're not the Security Council where Russia is the president. Putin found the need now to go ahead and invade since at the time that it had a body member of the United Nations Security Council. You see how that worked? And that Security Council president vetoed that resolution to intervene the United Nations into the conflict against Ukraine. India and Kenya's president, for the very first time, talked about their imperial experience from the West. And so, therefore, like I said, Biden is giving $400 million to Ukraine, and yet cannot find any money for Black folks. India has backed up again, also Russia. And like I said, Kenya, surprisingly shocked, gave a fiery speech at the United Nations. Therefore, they are sick and tired of white imperialists lying and basically not keeping their promise. Remember all of the promises that they kept to give us 40 acres and a mule here in America. You can see then, because we're not really reacting like other people react when they are not promised, shows you why Black people will never be able to get anything from this nation. And so therefore, I'm going to close out this video. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments as to what you think about the whole Ukraine situation. Leave your comments about the Russia versus Ukraine situation. And I do have a poll that I want you to vote either yes or no. But most importantly, if you disagree with me, leave your comments and tell me what you disagree with. You was listening to the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. And with all that being said, we will close out our video essay today. If it let me go off air. So, won't let my live in. I'm like, wow. Hold on. Like, share, and subscribe while we go off air. Like, share, and subscribe again. Leave your comments if I'm wrong. Also, don't forget to basically vote on our polls as well. If I'm wrong as well, and just tell me what that, and we'll go from there.